Hello class, it's a bright and beautiful Monday morning, March 21st, and we continue to move into cooperative writing, learning about writing and concept organization tools. And we ease back into our activities this week as well. So March 21st through the 26th is about cooperative writing. And so you'll read Chapter 6 on community building and collaborating with technologies. And then you'll submit your Astonishing Cooperative Writing with Technology project. And this project, of course, is a lesson plan, but it's more of a project plan, I think is a better way to put it, where you're going to create a student or learner project that requires your students or learners to create a written paper or project using a technology tool. And it must be a good example of cooperative learning, meaning that learners must work together and they must be assessed collaboratively as well as individually. And so you're also allowed to work with up to 2 other people in the class to complete this project. If you decide to work with 2 other people, as you have probably already decided whether you are or not, then you can, of course, just submit 1, but make sure everyone's name is on the assignment for your group. But here's what's required. You're going to have a project title and summary, describe your learner, grade, age, and general subject of the class. If you are a teacher, you need to include South Dakota content standards covered in this project, as well as ISTE net standards. And just 1 or 2 of each group of standards if more than this apply. So just 1 or 2 should just be used, just 1 or 2 standards from the net standards, and maybe just 1 standard or 2 from the content standards. So be aware of that. We don't need to list a whole bunch of standards. It's much easier just to list 1 or 2. You're going to include a description of how students and learners will be grouped for this project and why they will be grouped in this way. So you have to think a little bit more deeply about grouping. How are they going to be grouped in this project and why? And there needs to be a good reason why you're grouping them that way. And then a description of what students and learners will complete at the end of the lesson. So what is this written project? It could be a paper. That's fine. A lot of people do that. Online storybook. It could be a comic book or concept map, but there has to be some kind of writing involved that's collaborative. And include what elements you require students to include. So what should be in their project? What are you going to look for when you grade this project? And a lot of times teachers in here say things like, I want to see 5 fun facts about this thing that you're writing about, or I want to see this many pages, this many graphics, whatever it is. But make sure you have some items there of what you're looking for. Make sure you include a list of materials and technologies used by the teacher and students, the intended learning outcomes from the lesson, a timeline of activities. And this is an important part of the lesson plan is to have, or project plan, is to have a timeline. Like how long will it take? What's each step in the project? And don't just say day 1 we're going to do this, day 2 we're going to do this. No, give more detail on that. Like what are we going to do exactly during each step of the process? What are the students going to be working on right now in this part of the project? Now what are they going to be working on? What am I going to be doing as a teacher? Those kinds of things. And then an assessment plan that shows how you would intend to measure learning as a group and individually, because that's a good part of project-based learning, is to assess both individuals and groups of students. So that's the plan. You make a lesson plan. Now my suggestion is that you write this down. You have this somewhere, these required items written down somewhere, and then you put them into a different format to submit them to me. So remember, you got to put it into a different format now. And this assignment can take many forms. You can create a poster, podcast, storybook, concept map, presentation, etc., but it must be completed online using one of the following tools. Or a tool that you approve with the instructor. So you can choose one of these tools and make your lesson plan into one of these items. Make sure, though, that you don't lose any of the information that you wanted to have in here. Make sure all this information is included when you convert it to one of these formats, whether it's a podcast or a poster or whatever it is, concept map. And you must choose a tool that you have not used on a previous assignment in this class. So when you create your lesson plan, you're going to create it like that. I'll show you a few examples so that there's no confusion on this. Of course, I'll be grading your collaborative writing project using this rubric right here. So take a look at that right before you submit it. That's a good idea to make sure that you have everything there. Well, let me show you those few examples. I have one here. It's Among the Hidden Comic Review. After reading the popular teen novel Among the Hidden, students will work in groups to create a comic book that summarizes the setting, plot, characters, and the ending. And so this is the assignment that I received. It was presented to me using Prezi, one of the possible tools in the list. And notice that they give an overview of the project, then they give some standards for the project and the ISTE-NET standards. And then it talks about how the groups are formed, and it talks about how the project, what the project is, what's required, what the teacher will look for in the project. And that's the rubric for the project that they expect students to submit to them. So that's a good thing to have. Materials for teachers, materials for students, learning objectives, there's a whole bunch. And so that's one of the assignments that scored fairly well in this project. One thing that you can be sure of is that if the more detail you have, the better. That there's going to be more detail about exactly what we're going to do for the project timeline and what we're going to do for what am I exactly looking for in students' projects, then the better. Here's another one. I'm just going to close this little navigator here. So this is Let's Tour the Body project. And so this is a spider scribe little project, and it tells about the different aspects of the project. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so we can see more of it. And you can drag and drop and look over at all the different elements that are included. So we have a Let's Tour the Body. We have materials and technologies needed. We have student grouping, the reason why they group students that way. We have the outcomes, content standards, a grading rubric, comic strip instructions, and so forth. And if you look, they've attached even documents here so that you can view those documents with the rubric in them. I'll give it a second for it to come up here. So you notice they've provided pretty good level of detail for each element of the learning plan, and that's what I'm looking for. I know that as teachers, if you teach every day, so here's a rubric, by the way, for that assignment. If you teach every day in the classroom, you don't develop lesson plans that are very detailed. It's just not a common thing to have every lesson plan put out in a high level of detail. However, creating a nice high-level detail lesson plan is pretty much a prerequisite for you being a good reflective teacher. So you have to be able to have this skill even though you don't do it every day, especially for those kinds of lessons that you might be evaluated on. So make sure that you do have a high level of detail, that you're a highly reflective teacher having thought through a lot of the detail of this lesson before you submit it. And that will bode well. All right, well, that's about it for this week, March 21st through the 26th. Just, again, chapter reading and then submitting your cooperative writing with technology project. So I wish you luck, and let me know if you have any questions.